Welcome.
Hello.
Nice to have you back.
It's good to be here. I've got all kinds of information. I'm sure people have a lot of questions regarding financing.
Well, Dad's a tough act to follow, so I expect a lot.
I'll see
No,
what I
no
can do.
pressure. So here to talk with us about being able to finance and afford ADUs. Christy is a mortgage loan officer with Best Cap Funding, and she is really good at helping people check all the boxes and be able to qualify for the financing they need to to buy the home they want. So, Christy, let's talk about the finance angle for multi-generation units.
Great. Well, let's start with there are some restrictions if you're purchasing a property that has, let's say, a regular built house, and let's say it has a manufactured house on it. You wouldn't think it would be a problem. But as far as financing those type of properties with regular Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or VA or FHA, um, they don't like that type of scenario. So there is alternative financing for those type of properties. So if you run across something like that and you're interested in it, you can reach out to your current lender, or you can always reach out to me because I have a plethora of information to share with you. If you don't have anybody to talk with, I'd be more than happy to help you with any questions. If it has a second structure on it, um, that is what we call stick built. In other words, it's not
Okay.
manufacturing; it's actually built on the property. Then that's not a problem, provided it was permitted. If it wasn't permitted, then they just don't count the value on that structure. But it doesn't mean that you can't get it permitted. So that's one of the things that the new law that came out stating that if you have an ADU built on your property, but you never got it permitted because you weren't able to at the time, but now the county is allowing you to come around and get that property permitted, getting that
Yeah.
ADU permitted. So
So the
that's nice.
permitting the permitting is a lot less stringent than it was. Uh,
Correct.
if you want to add the ADU to the value of your property, you still got to get it permitted, is
Correct.
what I heard you saying. But
Correct.
and while not getting something permitted may be appealing to some people, ultimately, if you plan to resell that property and get the maximum value out of it, you're going to want to get it permitted. Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct. And since you're putting the value into the property, you kind of, if you plan on selling it, you're going to want to have that permitted so you can benefit from the value that it brings to the property. And if you want to finance it, because that's the thing is when you're buying these type of properties and sellers are selling them, they want to maximize on, the most value they can get from these properties. So, and
So, sorry, go ahead.
no, they're very desirable. More and more, I'm seeing people really looking for that type of property that's got an accessory dwelling unit, if not to have their in-laws live there, or children that are trying to save for a down payment. They just can't get ahead. They can participate and help, by paying rent or whatever, and then save money for their next house. It's very highly desirable and needed.
Do you see a
Because
lot of interest in ADUs as income producing um, units that they can rent out?
yes, yes, anything that can help with income, especially in the high prices that we're seeing recently. With there's just the lack of inventory. It's all about supply and demand. And so right now there's a lot of demand and there's just not enough supply. And so the builders, like Richard was talking about, they weren't doing a lot of building in the last 10 years. I mean, well, the last 2 years they've been trying to build, but haven't been able to keep up with the demand. And so that's why housing, I think, is really, the prices have gone up quite a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
also the fact that a lot of people can work from home, which is a real benefit. So you don't have that commute. And so now people are moving, outside their area of where they would normally have to stay within because of their job. And so a lot of people, because they're working from home, they may need like an additional dwelling just to have their office, so they're not in the main house where,
Sure. Yeah.
so we're seeing that too.
How do we so if somebody who's interested in building an ADU, maybe they've got the space on their property for it. What are um, what are the routes to getting it paid for?
That's a really good question. So let's say you have the existing home and there's some equity in there. You can do an equity line of credit, pull some cash out and pay for it that way. Or possibly refinance, pull cash out instead of doing a first and second combination. So those would be the two ways that you could finance it if you don't have, the financing. A lot of people don't have, 50, $75,000 laying around. But so I would say just either refinance or do, if you have a great first mortgage on your home right now with a low interest rate, just do an equity line of credit.
What would you say are the preferred types of ADUs and yeah, preferred types of ADUs for people who want to bring like a grandparent closer to home or or a child closer to home, but they like the idea of having a separate space for them.
Well, there's a lot of different options. They're coming out with all these new technologies as far as building out ADUs that are very desirable. I mean, you can get a kit home, which basically is like a prefab where it's already pre-cut and pre-measured kit home where you pay to have it put up. You get a contractor and you do all the proper, uh, you know, um, things with the county as far as permits and that type of thing. Um, or you can just do what's a regular, what we call a stick built, just a regular small
Your
home,
standard
your
structure.
standard structure. If you get a manufactured home, um, you'll have some issues with the resale. Just be aware of that
Oh
because,
yeah.
yeah, so that's just something to be aware of. You can get a manufactured home where, as long as it's on a permanent foundation, but there's still some issues with financing those type of homes. Like if you were to go to sell that, as far as financing it through the regular conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac type conventional loan or FHA or VA, they have restrictions on having modular homes along with a regular home on it for whatever reason. I'm not sure what that reasoning is. Doesn't mean you can't get financing. You just probably have to go to an alternative financing. So just note that if you're considering putting a modular home on there.
And
So
when you say alternative financing, do you mean private party?
correct. So it's not a government loan.
Okay. Okay. And that goes back to one of the points of this live stream from the beginning, which is that the um, when you combine the purchasing power of multiple parties, then the ideal living scenario can be a lot more achievable for all of you.
Yes, yeah, and they've lightened up a lot on um, ADUs that weren't permitted. If I hadn't mentioned that before, so check with getting if you have a current situation where you have a home and there was an ADU put on there and it wasn't permitted, they've lightened up a lot on getting those permitted, so you can count the value of that structure when you do go to sell it if you sell it. So
Hmm.
yeah.
I could see this trend making land more appealing and valuable too.
Yeah, it is. Certainly if you were to go and let's say build a house, you could finance the ADU in at that time as well. Might be an option with a construction to perm loan. Um, and if you're buying bare land and then if it's multifamily generational, then you just all finance it together and figure out how you want to do ownership as far as joint ownership or tenants in common, but that's getting onto another subject. But
Yeah, we'll
it's
talk about
possible.
kit homes at some point in the future too,
Yeah.
because that's a really interesting and exciting topic.
Well, there's also the tiny homes. I mean, tiny homes became really popular, and
Yeah,
but
yeah.
those are on wheels, and so you don't really have to get permits for those, except for maybe hooking up to a septic. And it's, or the other thing I'm seeing is people getting RVs and putting in, a separate septic. So there's all kinds of ideas that you can to do. Of course, we can't finance things on wheels because they have a tendency to go
Right.
away. So that's not really going to give the property any more value, but but
But
it's an option.
if you can't tell, we're all pretty creative around here. And Christy, I'm sure you would love to share your creative ideas about how people can afford these things and make it happen. Right? We all got to get a
Absolutely.
little bit of creative in these times. So it's um, so you want to know what your options are, and Christy's really good at explaining what she sees as your options. If anyone would like to talk to her privately, why don't you give them your contact information?
Absolutely. The best way to reach me is on my cell phone, and that phone number is 916-995-9324. Or you can reach out to me via email, and that is Christy, and that's spelled Cristi at bestcapfunding.com. And if you send me an email or send me a text, I'd be more than happy to share what's called an ADU handbook with you that might
Ooh,
answer a lot of questions. So please reach out to us. We're here to help. If you have any questions, um, we'd love to help you.
wonderful. Hey, thank you for joining us again on this latest episode of the West Report. We're gonna call it for now, but we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.